First thing you need to do when you create any new website is to set up a folder to hold all of the files in. And remember throughout this lesson that every time you make something new, you should save it in the same folder. So create yourself a HTML folder or a website lesson folder, whatever you want to call it, in your area, and make sure that you save everything into that new folder. The second thing you need to do is to open up Notepad from your Start menu, and it should look something like this. The first thing we're going to do is create the basic outline of any HTML web page, and you would do this regardless of what kind of website you were making. All you need to do is copy out the text that's going to appear on the screen now, and then we'll go through it in a minute and explain what each individual tag does and means. So that's how any basic website should look. The first thing you need to do then is save that as an HTML page. So if you go to your save icon and then find your folder where you're going to save your work, and then you need to make sure that you save it as an HTML file. So by default it's normal text file, and you need to go down to hypertext markup language file and then give it a sensible name, and then click the save button. The first thing you'll notice when you do that is it then starts to color code your text, and if it doesn't look like this then you've done something wrong and you need to go back and try again. So what does each one of these tags do? Well, the first tag, HTML, and you can see it's paired with the one at the end of the page, simply tells the web browser that this is an HTML web page. The next section is the header. In the header goes a lot of information which doesn't actually appear on the screen, and in complex websites you might have some code in here that makes things work. In our websites, the most we're going to have in here is the title, and later on when you learn about style sheets you will have a link to a style sheet in there. The title tag here sets the title of the website that will appear in the title bar of the web browser window, not actually on the screen, and you'll see what that means later. The body tag contains the main part of the website. Everything which appears on the screen will go in between these two tags. So if you find that you're trying to put something on the screen that's not appearing, in all likelihood you probably put it outside of this body tag. So everything that appears on screen must go between the open body tag and the closed body tag here. If we preview that in our web browser, there's many ways to do that. The easiest is to go to your folder that you created and simply double click on the page that you have in there. Your web browser should open up and it will be blank, but you will notice that you've got the title here, first website, in the title bar of your web browser. So that's all you need to know for the first part. Make sure that you fill in your table so you know what the HTML, head and title tags do. The body one is already filled in for you, and then in the next video we'll see how to add some content to a website. First thing we're going to look at is how to put headings into a web page. There are 6 different sizes of headings and the tags are very simple. It's simply H1 or 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6. And we'll have a look at all of those now by putting some simple headings into our web page. If you just copy what I'm doing and your example, make sure it works, and then you can fill in your table on your worksheet as necessary. Notice that we start it with the open tag H1 and we end with the slash, the closing tag, to show where the heading starts and ends. So to preview this in our web browser, you simply need to save the page, and if you don't save the page it won't change in your web browser. Instead of clicking on the save button, just use the keyboard shortcut, which is Control and S, which is much quicker, and then click into your web browser. Don't close this every time you previewed it, keep it open, and then all you need to do once you've saved your page, press F5 and you will see your changes on the screen. So don't close your web browser, just save your notepad, go into your web browser, press F5 and it should change. So we can see here that we've got different sizes of headings, from H1 the largest to 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 being the smallest. The next thing we need to learn is how to format text in our pages. We're going to do that by adding some text underneath each one of these headings and applying the appropriate tag. Now to get some text in, we're just going to use some random text so we're not wasting time there, and then we can copy and paste it across. To do that you need to open a new Word document and simply type in, as soon as you open it, equals lorem, L-O-R-E-M, and in brackets you need 6 paragraphs of text, so do 6, 10, press enter, and you get this random text here. And then all I'm going to do is simply copy each paragraph, and I'm going to paste it underneath a heading in my document. So a couple of things you should notice about this once you pasted it in is that our lines seem to go on forever. If you just go to view and then word wrap, that fixes that problem. And that we haven't put any tags around it yet. So obviously the last thing we need to do is then put some tags around this to show that these are paragraphs of text, and paragraph tags are simply P and obviously /P to finish. So just at the start and end of each paragraph add in a P tag and a closing one at the end, and then you can save your work using the keyboard shortcut, which is Control and S, and you can press F5 in your web browser to refresh. So when you view it in your web browser, you should get something like this, and you can see that underneath each heading we've got a paragraph of text. First thing you need to do when you create a new website is to create a new folder for all the files to go in. Generally all the web pages, images and style sheets should go in that folder, and it keeps things nice and organised, and it stops you having problems with things like images not appearing. So unless it's in an exam and it's told you to call your folder a specific name and put it in a specific place, just go to your IGCSE folder, right click, new folder, and give it a sensible name. And go inside there and you've got yourself an empty folder. You will normally be given in an exam or in this lesson a series of files which you're going to be expected to use later on in the website. In an exam it's probable that you'll have to go and download these from a website, and you're all capable of downloading files from a website, so I'm not going to go over that here. Or in this lesson they're just in a simple folder here. You might find if you download them off a website that they're in what's called a zip file, which is basically a bunch of files all compressed together in one place. To access that is very simple. It's the same as if they were just in a folder. You simply double click, find the files, and then you can simply copy those across to your area. So the first thing you need to do, set up a new folder in a sensible place, give it a sensible name, and then copy across any files you need for that task. The next thing we're going to look at is how to use Dreamweaver. You'll find it under your Start menu in All Programs IT, and you need to load it up. It's got a green icon with DW on it. And after loading you'll see this welcome screen here. You're interested in the Create New HTML page for the purpose of this tutorial. However, if you've previously made a page, you could go to the Open icon here and open that up. So click on New HTML, and then you're in the HTML editor. There are several things you need to be familiar with in this environment. This large window here is your working environment. It's where you can either preview your website, it's where you can see the code for your website, or it's where you can see a combination of the code and what it will look like. So we're going to have a look at how you do that now. By default up here you've got three buttons, Code, Split and Design, and normally it's on Design View. And that means that whatever you do here will appear on your web page. If you click onto Code, you get purely a code view and you get no preview of what that looks like. However, if you change something in code here and then went back to design view, it would show there. So for example, if I was to change BG color equals red and then go to design view, obviously it updates to show me that it's red. The split view is probably one of the most useful. It's where you've got the code on the left and the preview on the right, so you can see what's going on in both views. This is very useful because sometimes you'll need to drop into the code view to change something that you can't change effectively in the preview window. So most of the time you're going to be working in either design view or, if you need to, split view, so you can edit the code. If you want to see what your website looks like in a web browser, because it is slightly different, you need to click the preview button here and select the web browser. Notice the keyboard shortcut of F12, which will save you some time. What will also save you a lot of time is remembering to press Ctrl and S on your keyboard every time you want to preview it, so you save the page and it doesn't ask you to save each time. If you remember from the HTML lesson, the title tag has a title which will appear at the top of the document, and there's a box here so you can change that. So in this we will put our title for this page, which will be ICT Department Home, and if I press enter you'll notice it updates it here, and that will appear in the web browser window. How do you add things to your website? Well, if you go across to the right here, you have a number of panels. Sometimes they're closed, so on the insert panel here, which is one we're going to be looking at, if it's not there, simply double click on the word insert and it will appear with all the options you've got there. And quite simply, you just click on the things you want. So if you want a hyperlink, for example, or a table, click on the thing you want. Sometimes a window will appear with some options, and sometimes it will just appear on your page. CSS is another window you're going to need to look at. That stands for Cascading Style Sheets. We're going to be looking at in a future lesson. All you need to know is that some options we might use are in here, and again, if it's not there, simply double click to show that. Finally, at the bottom you have your Properties panel. This is one of the most important parts of the Dreamweaver interface. So if you can't find it, again, double click the name and it should be there. And this allows you to change all manner of options on various different bits of the page. And we're going to have a look later on this lesson at images and tables, and we'll be using the Properties panel a number of times. One final point of note is if for some reason you manage to get rid of these things, or you lose certain panels and you can't find them, one way to reset your workspace is to go to the Window menu, down to Workspace Layout, and just click on Reset Designer. And if you're not in Designer View, click on that, click Reset Designer, and it will reset it back to its default view. Tables are often used in websites to define the layout of the website itself, not just to hold information, but to actually hold all of the content of the website. So one of the first things you normally do when you create an HTML page is actually to insert a table and design how your website's going to look. In an exam, and indeed in this lesson, you will often be given a layout that you need to recreate and then add some options to. Fortunately, creating tables in Dreamweaver is a very simplistic task. Simply go across to the Insert tab and click on Table. You'll then be presented with this window here, where you have a number of options to set. The obvious one is rows and columns. In our initial table, I'm going to choose to have 4 rows and 4 columns. The width of the table is either set in pixels or in a percentage portion of the entire page. In this example, I'd like it to fill 90% of the available screen space. And then you've got these border and cell padding options. A border thickness of 1 means that you'll have a 1 pixel line around each cell on the table. For now, I'm going to leave that at 1. Cell padding is how much space there is in each cell before you've got any text or pictures, and I'm going to leave that blank for now. And cell spacing is how much space is in between each of the cells. All of these options are available to change after you've inserted the table. So if you press OK, you now get a 4x4 table, and you'll notice it fills 90% of the screen. If I wanted to, I could resize it by grabbing these handles here and dragging it around on the screen, as so. So what table skills do you need to know about? The first one is merging cells. Sometimes, for example, for a title, you might want to take several of these cells and merge them into one large cell. To do that, you simply click your mouse and hold it down in one cell, drag to highlight all of the cells you want to merge together, and then if you right click your mouse, you can go to the Table menu and Merge Cells. So to merge cells, you simply highlight the ones you want to merge, right click, Table, Merge Cells, and then you'll find you've got one large cell. What happens if you want to split them up? Perhaps we want to have many images in this row here and I actually want 6 cells instead of the 3 I've got. We can simply right click in an individual cell, go to the Table menu again and simply select Split, and it'll ask you how many rows or columns do you want to split it into. And in this case I've chosen 2 columns, and I can just do that to each one of these cells individually. Sometimes you might find that you need to either insert or delete entire rows. So for example, if we wanted to get rid of this row at the bottom, it's not necessary. We can simply highlight all of the cells like that, right click, Table menu, and delete row, and that gets rid of it. Sometimes you may need to insert a row, so again you just highlight the row, right click, Table, and insert. So 2 very simple operations there. Sometimes you may want to select individual sections of the table or the whole table in order to change some of the formatting options that you have for the table in the Properties panel at the bottom. If you hover your mouse around the edge of the table, you'll notice it highlights certain sections in red. So for example here I'm highlighting the entire column, and if I go to the edge I'm highlighting the entire table. It's very useful if you want to know that you're applying a set of properties to a specific part of the table. We talked previously about cell padding, cell spacing and borders. If I was to preview this in a web browser now, this is what you would see. Okay, you can see the outline of my table, but often this isn't what we want. We want to hide the fact that we're using a table as an outline. So if we go back in Dreamweaver and I select the whole table again by going to the edge and selecting the red border, I can simply go down to the border option, set it to 0 for no border. I also might want to, in the exam, set some cell spacing, the space between each cell. I'm just going to set that to 2, and cell padding, I'm going to set that to 2 as well. You'll be given those numbers if you need to in an exam or in a question. You'll notice that this turns now into a dotted line to show that it wouldn't appear on the screen, but obviously they're there so you can adjust it within Dreamweaver itself. If we go back to the preview now, you'll see that you can see nothing on the screen, even though there is a table there. If I highlight the screen, you can see these blue dots, which represents the individual cells of the table. Finally then, we just need to examine some more of the properties that you can have for tables. By default, text and images in table cells is aligned to the left-hand side horizontally, and center aligned vertically. And we can change these, and you will often be asked to change these in exam questions to suit. If we go down to the bottom, we've clicked in the cell here, go down to the bottom to properties, you can see horizontal and vertical alignment. So for example, if we wanted to have it fully centered, we could simply select center and middle, and you can see the cursor goes there. In these boxes, what happens if we want it on the right and at the top? We simply choose horizontal to the right and vertical to top, and you can see the cursor goes there. So you may be asked to change individual alignment of cells. You can also highlight a bunch of cells and change the horizontal and vertical alignment. If you need to specify a certain width for a cell, you can simply click in it and type in the number of pixels into the width and height attributes here, that's W and H. And if you need to set the background color of individual cells or a bunch of cells, you can simply highlight those, go down to BG and pick a colour that you need to change those cells to there. Finally, should I want to change the width of my table, again I said that all those properties were available after you've made the table, and if you highlight the whole table, go to the properties, and you can change the width here from percentage to pixels if you need to, and that again would be specified in any question you had to answer. In some of these IGCSE exam questions, you're not just going to be using one program to reach a final result. So for example, when you're making websites, you're not just going to be using Dreamweaver. Whenever you're asked to edit an image, you should be using an appropriate piece of image editing software, and in our case that's Photoshop. You can find that in your start menu under All Programs ICT, and when you load it up it should look something like this, and I've already preloaded an image in here. You don't need to be able to do a great deal with Photoshop, but the few skills you do need we're going to go through in this video. The first thing is how to resize an image, and there are actually two ways of doing that. If you just want to change the image in its entirety, you can simply go to the image menu, image size, and you can type in a size in pixels or percentage if you, for example, wanted a 50% reduction in size. One thing to notice is you've got this box here, constrain proportions. If you untick that box, it allows you to resize the image without maintaining the aspect ratio. In other words, to distort the image. So if I tick that box, and for example, I want this to be a width of 200, it will automatically calculate the height as 231 to maintain the aspect ratio. So we're resizing the same amount in the width as we are for the height. However, if I undo that and untick the constrain proportions box, and I type in my width of 200, it leaves the height, so it would be distorted. It wouldn't resize the height in the same way as the width. So that's two ways of resizing, one by constraining the proportions, in other words keeping the aspect ratio, and one without. And when you do that and press OK, it will resize the image. The second way of doing it is by using the crop tool, and this enables us to both resize and crop at the same time. It's very powerful. So for example, if we wanted to crop right down to the top and bottom of this image and we've been given a specific size, we can simply click on the crop tool, go up to the width and height box here and type in the width and height in pixels. So for example, in this image I want it to be 250 pixels. Notice I type px. If you miss off the px, it will presume you're working in centimeters and you'll get vastly different results. And I'd like my height to be 260 px. And then all I need to do is draw an area on the screen where I want to crop, and it will be constrained. It won't allow me to go outside of those constraints. So now if I adjust that and I press enter, or I click the tick up here, it both crops my image and resizes it at the same time. So if you're given an exact width and height and you want to crop at the same time, that's another way of resizing and cropping your image down to size. And then all you need to know about is a few of the simple adjustments. In the image menu you have two options which you're most likely going to need. One is the adjustments here, and one is image rotation, which does exactly what it says on the tin. You can rotate it 180 degrees, in other words flip it upside down, clockwise or counterclockwise 90 degrees, or this option here, arbitrary, which means that you can type in a number of degrees. So say you wanted to rotate it 15 degrees, you could just type that in and it would rotate it for you. And you've also got your flip options here. This is very similar to the options you looked at in Word when you did image manipulation earlier on in the course. The other menu then is adjustments, and in here are some very powerful options for changing the way the image looks. And obviously a lot of these are self-explanatory. Brightness and contrast will add or remove brightness and contrast to the image. Hue and saturation will allow you to change the type of colours, as you can see there, and also the amount of colour. So if we drop the saturation down we end up with a black and white effect. We can also brighten and darken our image in here. And finally, if I go back to image adjustments, you can see that there is this black and white option. So if you're asked to desaturate or black and white a picture, go here, and you can usually just use the defaults. If you really wanted to, you could play around with some of the effects that you've got here, and you press OK and you have a black and white image. So you should be able to resize your image, both constraining the proportions or not. Should be able to crop and resize using the crop tool here. You should be able to rotate your image and flip it if you need to. You should be able to make adjustments for brightness and contrast, for hue and saturation, and for black and white. And the only other thing you need to know about is saving as different file types, where if you go to File and then Save As, all you need to do is simply choose a different format from the menu, and quite often the only ones you'll ever need to know about are JPEGs, JPGs, PNGs, and sometimes you may need to know about GIF files, GIF. They're the most common formats that you would use on the internet, and indeed for most pictures. So for example, if I want to save this in the file format of JPEG, I just go down to JPG, click Save, and it will save a copy with those options. To insert a picture in your website is very simple. Simply click in the area on the page or in the table that you want your image to be in. Go to the Insert, click on Images, and then choose your image from the list. However, make sure that your images are in the same folder as your website, otherwise you may end up having some issues later on. Press OK to insert that. It will put up this box here which asks for alternate text, which is what you get if you hover your mouse over it or if the picture doesn't appear, and a long description which we can ignore. So I press OK and my image appears in Dreamweaver here. You still have options. You can actually resize the picture in Dreamweaver. It's not as good as doing it in Photoshop, but you can do it this way. So for example, if I wanted to resize this down to be smaller now, so let's say 125 by 130, you can see that I resized my image. If I want to move it around, I have the option of changing the alignment as shown in the previous video. There is an align option for the picture itself, however it's better to use the align in the actual cell because you can change the horizontal and vertical alignment. So for example, if I want it in the middle, I'm just going to choose center and middle, and there it is in the middle of my cell. The other thing you might notice is it resizes some of the cells in your table. That's not a problem. You can just resize those back to how they were before and then carry on inserting and editing images. In any exam task you're going to need to evidence your work, and obviously hand it in. In the exam you will get absolutely no marks if your name is not on every single thing you produce. So everything you're asked to print out or show in evidence must have your name somewhere on it. And that's a problem in websites because at some point you're going to be asked to print out the code that you have created. And that's why you're going to need to learn how to print in code view and obviously in the web browser preview as well, and to put your name somewhere on there. You're not allowed to handwrite on your printouts. So how do you do that? If you go to the code view here, you'll see obviously all the HTML that makes up your website. And what you can do is at the end of your page or at the top of your page, which is probably the recommended option, is to insert a comment which has your name in it. So your name will be printed on the website when you print it out. To insert a comment then, just insert a blank line at the start of your HTML page. When you're in code view, go across to insert, scroll all the way down, and you should see this comment block here. And inside there, you'll see it puts these tags here using greater than, less than symbols again. You've got an exclamation mark and 2 hyphens. And inside there, you can just type in your full name, candidate number, and center number. And then when you print this out, obviously you'll have your name, candidate number, center number on it, but it won't affect the website when you view it. If I go back into design view, you can't see any of that text I've just typed in. So printing is very simple. If you go to code view, file and print, when you do it in your lesson, choose the PDF printer. I'm going to choose XPS document writer. It's exactly the same thing. In the real exam, you would actually physically print it out. So you wouldn't have to go through the next step, which is to give it a sensible file name. So I'm just going to call it code. I've already got one, I'm going to replace it. And then I get a printout of my code. When you're using the computers in our lessons and on the exam, you'll be using Internet Explorer as your browser, not Firefox as I've been using in these videos. When you do go to the print menu, it's up here, and you go to print, and again it's exactly the same, but first go to page setup. And then in headers and footers, at some place, you can change these, or you can go to an empty one, choose custom, and again, remember to type in your name, your candidate number, and your center number, because every printout must have your name on. And then when you print that out, you'll have a printout in, obviously, browser view, with your name on, center number, candidate number. Finally, you should be able to do what's called screenshot evidence, which is basically you'll be asked to print screen something. All you need to do in that case is just make sure that everything is legible and you can see all of a page. So for example, if you wanted to print screen a part of your code for some reason, make sure that you can actually read it, and if it goes off the bottom of the screen, make sure you do more than one print screen obviously, so you can see everything that's in your website. So the first thing we're going to look at is how to create hyperlinks to an external website, and we're going to look at creating hyperlinks out of images and out of text. Both processes are very, very easy. To create a hyperlink out of an image, simply click on it, go down to the properties panel at the bottom, and you'll see a box called link, and you simply type in the website address there that you want to link it to. Notice that in these links I'm actually putting in the HTTP colon and 2 slashes, and that can be quite important because in some circumstances it won't work if you just put the www dot in and not the HTTP. So the Wikipedia address is en.wikipedia.org. And if I now preview my website, save changes, you can see that now when I move my mouse cursor over the picture, it becomes the little hand pointer that you're familiar with when you've got a hyperlink, and if I click on there, it takes me straight to Wikipedia. You should always test your links after you've made them just to make sure that they work. So let's go back now and insert a hyperlink on the text Wikipedia. So in Dreamweaver again the process is very similar. This time we just highlight the text, and again we can go down to the link box here and we can type in the link again. Remember to press enter after you've typed in the link, and then that will confirm it and you'll see the familiar blue underlined text. Now we can test that by going to preview our website, save the changes again, and you'll see that we have the link underlined there. And if we click on it, it should take us straight to Wikipedia.